Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the podcast where we're moving the conversation forward about the choices you make in your daily life. I'm your host, Monica Cox, and I'm here right alongside of you, learning, growing, observing, and trying to make better choices consciously and subconsciously. Together, we're going to become better versions of ourselves and have raw, honest, open conversations about the things that truly affect our lives. And maybe, just maybe, finally get to a place where everyone else's BS doesn't trigger us. Welcome to this amazing podcast episode, guys. This is going to be something really unique, something different. But I have two colleagues and friends on with me today, Jaclyn and Joy, and we just met, I think, through the internet. I can't even remember how we met, but we connected over our desire to help women improve their fertility in a variety of ways, mostly holistic. And I have to admit, when I first met you guys, I was really, and we've talked about this before, so it's not going to be a shock to you guys, but like intimidated. Like you guys are like this wealth of knowledge, and so amazing to bring in your knowledge and your wealth into this space. But I brought you guys on not to talk about fertility. I want to talk to you guys about cancer because you both have your own personal journey, not knowing someone with cancer, but you both went through the process of healing from cancer. And I think this is a really common thing now, right? Like everyone knows someone, or let's just face it, most of us are going to deal with some type of something like this in the world we live in. But why my heart was drawn to bring you guys on is because you guys are a wealth of knowledge how to take care of your health to prevent these things. And I think a lot of people think like, well, it only happens to people who are, lazy or alcoholics or smokers or diabetics or, all these issues that are like, oh, okay, yeah, of course you're going to get cancer with that. But the reality is that cancer can hit us at any point. And, coming back to the title of the podcast, choices, is like, how do we choose to show up in what life has presented to us? And how do we choose to make a really shitty situation into almost not life's purpose, but bringing more meaning into our life, whether that's related to cancer or not, right? So, welcome, Joy. Welcome, Jaclyn. Thank you so much for coming on and being vulnerable and raw and talking about your journeys and how you've chosen to move through life now.
Thank you so much, Monica. I'm so glad that we met years ago. I think it was like, what, 2, 3 years ago. And thank you for providing a place where we can really talk like just real, raw and authentic about this journey. I know it's something that has changed me. And I really have so much compassion for women or anybody going through this journey. My heart is just expanded to wanting to share my story in hopes that it can help anyone on this path heal. I just have so much compassion for those on this journey. So thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. And Jaclyn, let's just start by who was blindsided by it, or who was like, I had some history in my family, so it wasn't a big surprise, but it still was a shock that it was my journey. Both. Go ahead, Jaclyn.
Well, I was pretty darn sure that I was never going to get cancer, at least not for quite a few more decades, because I was living the textbook anti-cancer lifestyle and eating anti-cancer diet, that kind of stuff. And I had this pain in my underarm, like my chest and my rib. And it was just a discomfort. It wasn't a pain. And I kind of asked a couple of my physical therapist friends and, whatever, like, hey, it kind of feels weird when I do this. And it just didn't go away. And it was only at certain times. And then it started to get worse and my body started kind of screaming at me. And so I went and got it checked out and sort of accidentally found it. And yeah, it did blindside me. But also I do know my genetics, and I do know that they're very not great, and cancer does run strong in at least my paternal side of the family. My mom was adopted, so I'm not sure, but my grandmother had passed of colon cancer that spread to her liver, and then my father actually just in a year ago, the same thing with him, but he also had prostate cancer tied in with that when they went exploring. So yeah, that took me by surprise, but more so because I thought I was doing everything to prevent it. But I guess that's why it was presented to me, and my body allowed the cancer, because there was a journey ahead of me to try and figure out what the cancer was trying to tell me.
Yeah. How about you, Joy?
I actually found my lump when I was comfort nursing. So my son was not quite 3. And being a naturally minded practitioner and a nationally board certified acupuncturist and herbalist, I hoped that it wouldn't happen to me. My mom died early of cancer, of breast cancer, and it was definitely in the back of my mind. When I found that lump, it was post COVID. I had COVID, and then it was just like, it just appeared. He felt it. I felt it. It was right next to my nipple on my left side over my heart, which I've recently discovered in this last year and a half journey how significant the location of it was. And I have a lot to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
We can dive into that in a little bit. So yeah, it was kind of my worst fear, having taken care of my mom. My mom did a lot of natural therapies for 5 years. She lived with a very difficult type of breast cancer to heal. She did not choose to do Western medicine. She did a little bit towards the end, IPT therapy, but it was very, very at the end. So yeah, it was basically my worst fear when I felt that lump post COVID. I felt like COVID caused some inflammation in the body, and it appeared. And I didn't want to face it. I was hoping that it was not what it was. I met with my naturopath, got an ultrasound right away. It was discovered on ultrasound, showing what it was, sort of a larger size, and then ended up doing a lumpectomy, which was not really successful, and then ended up doing a double mastectomy a year ago. So I chose to do an integrative path because I was fearful watching my mom do a lot of natural things. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do almost opposite of what she did. And I had already been doing a lot of natural things, and it apparently wasn't enough for me, or wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I really chose that decision to do the Western path, a double mastectomy and chemo, out of fear, and some out of seeing what happened with my mom. And so I've definitely embraced integrative medicine. I'd love to talk to you about that today.
Yeah, yeah. And Jaclyn, you did the same, right? You used obviously holistic stuff because you were living that lifestyle anyways, but you chose some Western support as well.
I did tandem care, and I had a really good team, because a lot of oncologists, they're just like my way or the highway. But I also had an integrative doctor that would send him the studies. She wanted me on artemisinin and a few other things. And he was like, okay, but the agreement was that, like, I do the chemo every 3 weeks, but I give it a week to let the chemo sit in, then I can do kind of whatever I wanted for the next 2 weeks, and we can talk about that. But I had always said I would never ever do Western treatment. But by the time that we found my tumor, it was literally the size of a grapefruit, and so it was growing very, very rapidly. The oncologist said that it wasn't there a few months ago, and so I just got really, really scared, and I didn't think I would have time to do the natural therapies if it was that aggressive. So I definitely did both together.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions before we dive into, the heartfelt part of this podcast. How did it benefit you already living a holistic lifestyle when you went in to use Western medicine?
I have so much to say about that. Like where to begin. So I feel really blessed to be able to have used the best of what I feel like Western care and natural medicine. So I knew the things to do. I consulted with, an author of a book, Heal Breast Cancer Naturally, Dr. V, and she had also advised with the size of the tumor to have it out. And I feel really blessed to be able to use a lot of the things that I did for integrative care. A lot of them that are free. So I guess the question was, how did it feel to be able to have both, right? Going into it. I knew that as scary as doing chemo was for me, it was one of the hardest decisions of my life to choose to do that. My oncologist asked me after I finished chemo, which was harder, deciding to do chemo or actually doing chemo. I wavered. She gave me an option of 3 or 6 months, but she said the 6-month chemo is really what I recommend, and it's the most aggressive. And I just teetered, and I to the point where they were almost like laughing at me in a nice, kind way, because I was just very indecisive. And when I decided to do the 6-month, it was so that I would look back and not have any regrets, that I did everything I possibly could do. I have 3 boys at home, my youngest being 5, and I chose the most aggressive. And yes, it was hard, but I also knew that I had integrative medicine, had natural medicine in my list of modalities and in my tools that could sustain me through the chemo process and the surgery process, and that I would not be this cancer patient going through chemo that you kind of have in your mind of like, oh, poor, like just miserable, right? You see the pictures and it's like, I chose to do, high dose vitamin C IVs. I had a naturopathic oncologist that worked very closely with my oncologist. My oncologist was someone that I chose on my team. She was naturally minded and very open to anything holistic that I wanted to do, which is really important for me. And I do advise people listening to this. My hope for this podcast is that you can learn, get encouraged to know that there are people out there that can be non-judgmental about natural therapies that you want to do and help you integrate. So I was seeing a whole bunch of different people. I was getting all these different second and third opinions. I really did extensive research. I read books. I educated as much as I possibly could, and also leaned on some information that I had witnessed my mom, strategies that my mom had used. So I feel like I left no stone unturned, if you will. I did it. That was exhausting in and of itself, as making the decisions. But once I had my team in place of my medical oncologist and a naturopathic oncologist that played well together, meaning she recommended him, so they were very integrated. That plus, acupuncture and having colleagues work on me. My nurse practitioner neighbor, she opened her own IV business just to help me, because the naturopathic oncologist had advised high dose vitamin C IVs for twice a week for a year. And that was, you talk about grit and just being all in. I was all in, and the kindness of her heart to just open her own IV business just to help me and not even charge me for the pricing. I don't even know how I would have done that, having a family and going through chemo and doing all and working. And I did take a lot of time off, but I don't even know how I would have done that without the kindness of her, so the kindness of people around really was incredible. So yeah, a lot of high dose mushrooms. I really feel like that protected my brain. It protected my brain from the chemo process. I actually worked with an Asian herbal specialist, an Asian doctor from New York, who sent me teas that were already brewed and packaged to help with the toxicity of chemo. I obviously let everybody on my team know what I was doing, so nothing was like, oh, I'm doing this and it's not, you know what I'm saying? Everybody worked together. I did that. I started my morning with rise, mushroom coffee, which I think really helps me with my immune function and my brain and mental health throughout the chemo process. People don't talk about that, about how that could be harsh on your body. And then I really dug into, daily exercise. People, like, I had a nurse that had beat cancer twice, and she's an ER nurse, and she said she met with me and she said, you can exercise every single day of chemo. You can do it. You can. So for the last 1.5 years, I just exercise every day. I bought a huge trampoline right here for me and my kids. I would finish chemo and we would go jump on the trampoline, and then we jump in the pool. I danced a lot. I really tried to raise my vibration, if you will, like truly. And I really took stock of, in Asian medicine, we look at mind, body, spirit, of the emotional health. So number one was, I looked at cancer as an opportunity for a rebirth, if you will, of shedding old layers of myself that weren't working for me. And the stuck patterns of joy and the ego and the personas that no longer were working for me. And I did a lot of deep diving into why it even happened in the first place. And what I found was that I had a lot of unhappiness in my relationship with my husband. And I used the diagnosis of cancer as a catalyst to truly transform my relationship with my husband and the feelings of inner conflict that we had and unhappiness. It's a completely different relationship today. So when you ask about integrative, how to integrate it, interestingly enough, as much as I want to say IVs and mushrooms and, you know, all the things, I would say number one is connecting with my source, which is God. We got baptized about right after my diagnosis, after the lumpectomy. I got baptized. My husband and I both came out of that water as new people. And when we go back to resentment or unforgiveness or old patternings, we actually look at each other in the eyes. We go, oh, that was the old guy. Yeah, I don't like that guy. Like, and same thing with me. We had new names with the wigs. I literally took on different aspects of myself that were more vibrant and not stuck in old patterns. And so for me, it was connecting with spirit and source. And then that kind of ties into really focusing on mental, emotional, relational, and spiritual health. I would say is all that is number one in how I feel like I'm cancer free. So I use that as a catalyst, and we actually got really clear and honest with each other. I had one of the hardest conversations I've ever had with him, but it was so honest and necessary. Basically, after my diagnosis, saying, "This isn't working for me," and it was more like, this isn't working for me. It wasn't like, oh, like, it was like, okay, I've said this before, but maybe you're not hearing me. This is not effing working for me anymore. And so, it was a tough conversation to have. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want this anymore. This is not the way that it's going to be. And so, as far as that was, he started making changes, and he actually took responsibility for his own mental health with his ADD and the shame cycle and how that was impacting a relationship. And so he took accountability and responsibility for that, which was partly like letting go of sugars and alcohols and things so that his mental and emotional health was better. And then I took responsibility for the shame cycle for me, where we would fight and I would shut down my heart chakra. It's no surprise to me that the tumors were right over my heart, right? The ability to receive and give love was completely blocked. We had inner conflict. So we've healed our relationship, and yeah, it was work and it was totally worth it, you know? So I took responsibility for the shame cycle of shutting down. When we would argue, I would shut down and cry and get depressed. And I had a lot of shame around being depressed and the feelings of that. Now I look at it as I welcome it. And I realize that feeling down is a normal part of life that we all experience. And I no longer feel any shame about it. And I also know how to take care of myself better. So one of the things for me for emotional health is exercising every day. I'm realizing I'm one of those people that my energy needs daily movement for me to be able to be my emotional best self. So I could go on about that.
I mean, for me, and this is why I asked this question, because Jaclyn, you once said, and I'll let you tell your story too, but you know, you were roller skating through chemo, you know, and Joy, you were bouncing on a trampoline and getting in the pool with your boys, you know, like, and maybe not every time, right? I'm sure there was times you needed to go and just lay in bed and be restful and stuff, but that difference that you had just a little bit more energy to live life. And because you were maybe thinking like, I'm fighting for my life, I'm actually going to live my life, not just like step by step. This is what society thinks I'm going to do. And Jaclyn, yeah, like I think that was one of the things that really like drew me to you. I was like, yeah, girl, like getting on like a skate ramp on your roller skates. And like, so yeah, tell us what you did. You know, the holistic side, yes, it's important, the IVs and the mushrooms and the food, and you have to have that, right? Like, there's no question. We're not arguing about that. But it is that joy and that true, authentic piece of life where, let's just face it, that's probably really missing in your life if your body's coming up and saying, hey, wake up. right? And if you're not going to wake up, I'm going to give you something to wake up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had actually journaled about that when I was going through the journey, was that like I was questioning a lot of the reasons, like why cancer came and happened for me. And I kept saying that it's happening for me, not to me. And I just had kind of felt that over the past years, maybe a decade or so. I don't know if it was before having children or because of having children or whatever, but like I used to have a very bright inner light, and I was, very spiritual. I was never really considered myself religious at all, but definitely spiritual and vivacious, and people were drawn to me. And like over the years, that just sort of died down. And I don't know if that's just the stress of being a mom and lack of sleep and, work and all that stuff. But I realized that that light was very dim, if even there. And so also, I just, I wasn't hanging out with friends. While all my closest friends live so far away, and I don't seem to have like too tight of a community here. There's people I'll hang out with and stuff, but the kindness that people showed me when I was going through that journey, somebody created a very specific meal train for me, a very good friend of mine. And she said it so I didn't have to, because, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has definitely been linked to glyphosate. And I didn't want to be lecturing people about that. So she was just like, don't sign up for the meal train if you're not going to bring her anything that's not organic, And so she spoke for me, and just the people that I hadn't seen or never even hung out with, like, had brought me meals, and they were just scheduled for the week after each chemo session. But just feeling that love and that sense of community, and then also feeling like I had confidence in my care team, because they were a unit working together on my behalf rather than for their own ego or successes. And so all of that, also coupled with insurance, I have to say, I know that there are people that are going through this, having exorbitant medical bills in this country. And I don't know that I would have survived it, because I wouldn't have been able to pay for all of the other alternative therapies. I'm telling you, I was doing deuterium depleted water for a little bit, and I was getting it at wholesale, and that shit is like $40 a liter wholesale. It's like $80. And but I was, really blessed that I was able to get it at wholesale for the amount of time that I did. And then I did vitamin C IV therapy once. I drove all the way down to North Carolina for it. And so all that stuff, it wouldn't have been able to happen. And I would have been stressing about bills, and it just would have been a completely different energy. I was actually able to, because of all these people, I was able to really focus on what I needed to do for myself to get myself well. So the kindness of the community, like everything you were saying, Joy, I was just like nodding, like, yep, same. And so back to your original question of like, how did living this anti-cancer lifestyle serve me? Like once I got the cancer, I feel like that is what allowed me to have because I had a higher baseline of health. Chemo didn't knock me down as far as it would for so many other people. Like you had said, I learned to drop in on a half pipe during my journey, and I was still skating my girls to school, and I was still doing yoga, and pretty much to the level that I had been prior to starting chemo. And I think my body responded really, really incredibly well. I mean, my oncologist was even surprised. I think that out of the 6 chemo treatments that were given to me every 3 weeks, I think that after the first one, my tumor was just obliterated, because prior to that first chemo, I was walking around with a pillow under my arm because there was just so much discomfort. And I want to talk about where the tumor was, because it's very similar to Joy's. But after that first treatment, it was like nothing happened. And then I got a scan before my 4th treatment, and the tumor was completely gone. And so my oncologist said, well, you don't have to do them, but we don't want to be playing Monday morning quarterback if it would come back, and like, should we have done more? So I did go ahead and do all 6 treatments. Those last 2 were incredibly hard for me, just because I was like, am I causing more harm to my body now that there isn't the cancer and like all this radiation and all the testing and stuff? But ultimately, I'm glad that I did that. And going back to what Joy was saying about where the cancer was, my tumor was, it started inside my chest, so I couldn't see anything. There were no lumps. But it got so big that it started to eat through my rib cage and eat away at my 4th rib. And I have a friend that does energy work, and I was just like, well, I had read also Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel. He was like an oncology surgeon, and
I read that one too.
Yeah, he has a really, he blends the East and the West really well together, and the whole like emotional aspect of it. But also, just being a yoga instructor myself, I was just like, could this have something to do with my heart chakra? Because my 4th rib is right there. And my friend was like, oh yeah. And the fact that it was on the side of your body could involve feelings of giving or receiving love, and issues there. And so I, just like you did, I had written a letter to my father, because there was just a lot of disappointment and resentment and sadness and frustration and anger, if I didn't already say that, mostly because of his wife. But since I was a small child, and I had the hard conversations, and I wrote the letter, and I my intention was for him to read it with my hand on his heart, so he knew that it wasn't like an accusatory letter, like blaming my cancer on him. I wrote it from a place of love and wanting to heal, and just really have him respond, because I had said stuff in the past, but it was just kind of minimized or redirected or something like that. And so this was like, look, this is your daughter, and she has cancer, and this is the time to listen. And he actually did apologize for, like, he took full responsibility for it. And so that felt like I finally felt validated for that. Not that it changed a whole lot moving forward, because there was a third party involved, but just to know that we had that connection in that conversation. So yeah, a lot of similarities. And also, like, in the beginning of my journey, I was trying to talk to my tumor and ask it, like, why, what is it trying to tell me? And it was like, I even made a video about this, a YouTube video, just for people, so I wouldn't have to keep saying the same thing over and over again. But like, at first it was like I was yelling to it from across the room, like it was just so foreign. But then one, a few weeks later or a couple months later, maybe it was with the help of a little bit of THC, I don't know, but I was actually able to like have this conversation almost, like it's within my body. And like it wasn't far away, it was here with me. And so I definitely was able to connect more with it, and again, change my vibrational energy, just like Joy had said. And then, I mean, I think there were some external factors that could have been a major contributing factor. The fact that it was right around COVID when my whole issue started, and I was taking my girls to a park that has a golf course, and we were roller skating and they were riding their bikes. And so I'm huffing and puffing every day for our quote unquote recess, right, during COVID. And it's in the spring when they're spraying everything, and I could smell it in the air. So maybe it was, that, but also I had a tooth that I had removed, a mercury filling, and it wasn't really done properly. And it was during my journey that I was seeing a craniosacral therapist, and she had just finished up, and she was like, she picked up on it. She picked up on my my immune system reacting to this tooth, but she didn't even know anything about my dental history, because I had a mask on. And so she just asked me about if I had any major dental work, and she was like, up on the top left. And I was like, how did you know that? She's like, oh, your immune system's reacting to it. I'd make sure you get that looked at. And I said, well, I've had x-rays, no dentist ever said anything. She said, no, you need to get a cone beam scan, which is a 3D scan. So I paid out of pocket, kind of begrudgingly, but I am so glad it was worth every single penny. And if anybody has any kind of question about their dental health, go get the proper kind of cone beam scan, because actually the dentist, my dentist office had a cone beam machine, but they said that there was, I don't know the difference, but they recommended I go somewhere else for it. And that there was an infection so bad that it ate through the bone to my sinus cavity. And so that was like 12 years prior. And so my immune system was just reacting to this. And so that, coupled with the glyphosate, coupled with the stress of COVID, coupled with just my energy, like I said, my light dimming down. I don't know exactly, or if it was the perfect storm, but it definitely was a call to action for me to bring more joy into my life and reignite that light and raise my vibrational energy. But like I said, I think that I wouldn't have been able to be as intentional and mindful of all that had I not had a really strong and solid baseline of health going into it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to pick up on something, Jaclyn and Joy, I think you can add into. You loved your father, though. Like, you mentioned him in your book and how, you admired him. And Joy, I kind of feel like it was maybe the same with your mom. And I think in my journey with my parents, and I think a lot of people can relate with this, there it could be both. You can have this ultimate joy and love and respect and absolute like just crazy what I think is just baggage, right? That generational trauma that no one's cleaned up properly, right? So I want, like, when people are hearing like, oh, she must have not had a great relationship with her dad because she had this, but that wasn't the whole truth.
Right. I wouldn't have been able to have that conversation and write him that letter and have him read it and receive it had I not had, maybe I could have, but it wouldn't have been as well received, and I wouldn't have felt as comfortable and at liberty to write that letter. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, absolutely. I knew my dad loved me, but it was just circumstantial
Yeah.
things, and, all, his
Yeah,
traumas and his,
exactly.
upbringing and all of that just kind of clouded it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think it can be complex. I definitely use some herbal medicine to journey into, my relationship with my mother. A lot of people say the left side of the body is related to the mother and nurturing. I did have reach out to a cancer coach. Somebody gave me a referral to a cancer coach in New York. Literally tried to explore everything I possibly could. And she, right off the bat, obviously we talked about some natural, like, off-branding label, like use of some pharmaceuticals for cancer that are kind of off-label and things like that, and some things that were helpful. But one of the first questions she asked me was, how was your relationship with your mom from 0 to 5 or whatever? And so I think that as women, we're usually seeking for even more nurturing from our parents or our mother than maybe we can always receive, right? And so I really explored that aspect of how do I nurture myself? How do I receive nurturing? Am I able to receive that from others? How do I give that? And how do I nurture myself? And that was a really powerful kind of journey in that as well. You mentioned the use of some THC. I did utilize gummies as well for like CBD and THC gummies after chemo. I would come home and, like you said, I would exercise, but I would actually go and ground after chemo, especially I did 16 rounds of chemo, and towards the end, it was extremely difficult. The first 4 that were the hardest for breast cancer, so is AC, is Adriamycin, Cytoxin. Those are the ones that caused me to lose my hair, and I would go and just ground into the earth. I would come home and take a gummy for the anti-nausea qualities and the calming qualities, and I would literally ground into the earth for sometimes an hour or two and meditate. And I would have a visual of women, all of my friends that love me and support me, and my doctors, my Dr. O is what I call her, I love her so much, my oncologist. I would visualize all of us holding hands around a large, like, huge, massive tree. And I would be in the middle with the tree, and I would visualize each one of them staring into my eyes, beaming all the love and support and kindness that I know that they have for me. And I would literally do that after at least the first 4 or 5 chemos. And I would visualize the love and just kindness just beaming from their eyes into my eyes. And I would look into each one of their eyes and see so much love and kindness and support. I think all that really helped me get through. And I asked my nurse, Bonnie, she was like, you can do this one, Zofran, in the 4 hours, and then you do the other one in the next 4 hours. I did that for the first week or two. And there were so many side effects from those. I think some people don't know if it's the chemo side effect or like the meds that they give you for the anti-nausea. So I did away with that. And I started to just do the gummies, and it worked way better than any anti-nausea medication that they gave me that had side effects that I didn't like. Those medications made me feel wiped out. So kind of started to do, and I had permission from my clinic, obviously, and not that I needed it, but
right. Okay, so my second question is a little bit more scientific. Genetically, we're predispositioned, right? We all agree on that. But is there a cancer gene? All right, guys, we are going to pretend like it's 1992, and we are going to pause this episode. It's to be continued. This is called anticipation. If you have not felt this in a really long time, you're welcome. I think it's a feeling that we all need to bring back into our lives. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And thank you once again for tuning in, and looking forward to continuing this conversation on the next episode. Thank you so much again for joining us here on Choices. You can go ahead and leave a 5-star review because we're all friends here. But if you really want to move the conversation forward, please connect with us on our social media accounts, which you can find the links below. Have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next time here on Choices.